Yeah.
I'd like to call the February meeting of the Rules and City Government Committee to order. Please note for the record, Alderman Arnett and Alderman Savage are in attendance. First order of business is approval of the minutes. But they're not attached. Ms. Green, do we have minutes? If you refresh, then they are attached.
Okay, how do you refresh?
That little, go back. Go back. Hit it at the very top. The blue up there, yeah. It's in there, a little round thing down there. Go back again. Okay. I'll entertain a motion if you gentlemen have read the minutes.
I'll abstain since I wasn't at the meeting.
I move approval of the minutes.
February 9th, you were at the meeting. At least you're listed as present.
Oh, okay. From the closed meeting, sure. I will.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. First on our agenda this afternoon is ID 2518, presentation on boards and commissions. Mr. Rowell, please join us at the table. Congratulations on your appointment to this position. So tell us what you do
And what you're gonna do to us.
for us.
I guess I should start by turning the microphone on. What I will do for you, to you, and with you, hopefully, is going to be fruitful in my role as the coordinator of boards and commissions, including some other things. But for the context of this meeting, it is on boards and commissions. And just to add some kind of background to the role that I fulfill now and what was there before is the previous person who was coordinator left office earlier, before the completion of the last term of Panelides. And his role with boards and commissions and processes were handed over to another staff person who coordinated a few other things also. In particular, it was Eva, who's in the mayor's office. And I referenced that because immediately when you come into a new position, the first thing you do is you look through files and kind of survey, and an opportunity to get a knowledge dump to find out exactly what existed before. The one thing about boards and commissions that I think we all should know, even informationally, is that it's bound by code, and it isn't arbitrary, and none of it is, it shouldn't be as subjective as is often thought so. And so in looking for this information in the files, what I was looking for was somewhat of a trajectory of how previous boards and commissions were seated. The appointments, the applications, who recommended them. Some of that information is there, some of it is non-chronological and antiquated. So I've been in the process since about the second or third day that I arrived, in basically cleaning up those files and creating a process that was more streamlined and less subjective. So step one for me was to work with the city clerk and work with our law office to find out exactly which codes were still relevant, to find out the actual appointment process, the steps, who it starts with, who it ends with, and then also to find out how the boards and commissions were adhering to ethics standards. And one of the things that arose quite early was the fact that there are several boards and commissions whose members haven't been effectively signed in or sworn in, and that they had in the past conducted what could be loosely called orientations or trainings, which I think is incredibly important if you're sitting on a body to understand not only their purpose, but to also understand what individual members of a board or commission are supposed to be bringing to the table, so that it's not based on individual motives or a reason that they sit at that table to act out certain things for a constituent base that they have that's not tied to that specific board and commission. And the next thing is also to understand that for each board and commission, they are supposed to be aligned with a coordinating committee or policymakers from specific wards, and thereby constituents in specific wards. So having gone through that, I cleaned up what could be considered a pretty large list of vacancies. And some of those vacancies, I think the miscommunication externally has been that a lot of those seats that are quote unquote whose term has expired are immediately subject to being replaced, and that immediately they will be put through a process where their service for however many terms or however much time they've been on that board or commission is not considered, and that's been something that's been is probably expected from you all who have served in your capacity for a while, but for me that's a bit challenging because that lets me know that the communication aspect of these boards and commissions and understanding their purview is much needed. So there's a binder. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we need to have some questions.
Okay.
Oh,
Do you
okay.
mind if we interrupt you as
Absolutely.
you go?
Absolutely.
So we won't forget. Alderman?
So you threw out several interesting things, and clearly some of them we've known about and worried about for a while because there are a huge number of vacancies, and
Right.
it puts a strain on the people who are on the commissions, but also quite often causes meetings to have to be postponed or rescheduled because there's not a quorum. But you said something interesting, determine how independent they are, which I'm wondering how you do that.
Well, as I said, each board and commission is bound by a specific code in the city code, and I view that as a kind of grounding document that so it actually works. Not what is determined by that board or what has been determined over time, but to me, I go back to what establishes why they were created, and from that we get to their specific role and function.
Well, I took something a little more sinister in what you were saying.
Oh, no.
And that there were questions if there were people on the board representing a vested interest.
Yes.
And I guess I'm interested on how you've been determining that.
Well, my other role is public engagement and
Okay?
community
I don't
relations.
even know what that is.
Right. So essentially what that means is dealing with community-based issues, a lot of nonprofit organizations, and a lot of processes at the community level that is responsive in response to what happens in these halls.
So it's boards and commissions and community engagement.
Right.
Is it fair to ask you how that interleaves with all of the other, like, what is Janice's job
So,
and what's Brian's job?
right. So my position in the mayor's office is a pre-existing position. So Kyle Tibbs
Yeah.
had
Know him well.
right. His function was also an aspect of community relations. And your question is, how do they interface or intersect? And the answer is that boards and commissions is, as coordinator, that is a function that could be almost clerical in its core, which is the coordinator is not a decision maker when it comes to who is on a board or commission. That's point one. So, there's a lack of subjectivity there. And the second thing is the person who coordinates boards and commissions essentially posts and notifies the members of committees and post agendas for upcoming meetings from boards and commissions, and which then puts it into the calendar so that it's on rotation.
Right.
Right. So
And he also attends, he or she, the meetings of the commissions, right?
not all of them, which would be really hard, but for the most part, some of those meetings.
So I may have misheard you. You said boards and commissions and community engagement.
Right.
That's different than community relations.
Well, it's public engagement, community relations.
So I think we need you to define public engagement.
right.
Because
Oh.
I think we have an idea of what that means.
Right.
But we're not sure that that's what your title encompasses.
Yeah, well, my title encompasses that. If I were to give you an example of some of the collectives and work that I do, for instance, I'm working with, I'm on the planning team for the county and the city's youth violence task force. So the monies that's being pulled down in the planning process with the county, I sit on that body, and that is an extension of the community relations piece, right? Because I'm representing various communities in Annapolis as a city employee, office of the mayor in that process. And the other piece is, for instance, Eastport working together.
Mm-hmm.
I engage on both sides of that, both as a community person through the city who interfaces with members of our community and elevates their issues. And then also the public engagement part is through Eastport working together. It is an aspect of working with Bishop Coates, the police department, and others to engage with the public through these entities, which are city entities. How that, the other part of your question was essentially how that runs along Janice Hayes-Williams' position. So
Right.
she's constituent services and ombudsman, which means that she's dealing with actual organizations and entities that are either county, like literally county entities, but she's also referring. So if anyone calls in with a constituent issue, let's say there's flooding in a basement or someone's cat's up in a tree, or someone wants to know about a specific issue that happened in a meeting, she's the person that's referred to, and she deals with those issues. I don't deal with those types of issues.
Okay, still trying to sort. All right.
In
but-
what way?
Well,
I can
mean,
further clarify
First of all,
if you need.
they feel very different to me. Boards and commissions, and there's a lot of them, and
Right.
there's some people from one of them waiting here for their turn.
Right.
I think is quite distant from community engagement. So, I mean, it may well, you have a bifurcated assignment. You've got boards and commissions over here and community engagement over here, but I'm trying to figure out how those interrelate with each other.
Well, I'll actually, having worked for Los Angeles County government with population of several million, I think in a large metropolitan city, it would make sense to have them totally separate and hire two different people. If you all want to allocate that in your budget to hire two different people, I honestly think that boards and commissions, as I said, is a position and coordinating effort that is finite and very clear.
Okay.
Right.
I'm glad it's clear to you. It's not been
Yeah,
clear to me.
No,
But-
it is, because you have a list of boards and commissions.
Right.
You have a list of boards and commissions, and I'll go back to my original piece, that is bound by city code. So there's no gray area in that. And what the coordinator does is coordinates the meetings, the minutes, pushes it along where it needs to be. It does calendar scheduling stuff for space and meeting times. And then in the event, which in best case scenario, there would not be this many vacancies.
Right, well, that's...
I mean, there wouldn't, right. So technically, my hope is, and my long-term vision, or short-term or intermediate vision, is that when we fill all these vacancies, and everyone understands their roles, and you all as council persons have very clear understanding of who sits on there, who's recommended, who's appointed, all of those things, you're a part of that process. Then what happens is the work of managing boards and commissions, essentially shifts to something different. Chairs become more involved in their membership, and we don't have to meet and have so many different processes to get appointments fulfilled.
So, first of all, in my view, the council has given away far too much of its power to boards and commissions, but I think that another thing has been sorely missed is nobody's monitoring how the boards and commissions are functioning. I think that there are some real questions about the interrelationship between the boards and commissions and their legal counsel. Sometimes I think the legal counsel acts more like a member of the board than the boards and commissioners. I think that there are lots of things that I question in terms of things being done by fiat, the way the public are being handled by some of the boards and commissions. Now maybe you don't see that as part of your role, and that's fine, but I think we do need to have somebody do that. I think that that's an extremely important part. Frankly, I think the boards and commissions have the fun jobs and more important stuff than council members have.
Right.
But I think they also have a lot more really direct contact with and impact on the citizenry. And
Absolutely.
I think it's very important. And so I'd hate to think that this sort of distills down to a clerical function, as you said. I think we're going to rely on you or somebody in the administration to come to us with potential problems or the need for solutions if there's problems on the boards and commissions. If we have a person on a board or commission that just never shows up. That's a problem.
So.
It may be clerical, but it's still a problem.
Right. So to answer that too, and I'll be as brief as I can. I'm sorry, you all. So to touch on what you said about the idea that there's an imbalance of power and influence, which I would agree with you in some instances. So there's a fine line, Alderman, between for me in my position. One is I'm not an elected official, and I take very seriously the amount of influence or personal opinion or perspective that one could bring into a position where I am in the process. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I do believe that an evaluation process or process that allows all of us to look at boards and commissions, individual boards, commissions, dive deeper. And I framed it the way I did because I personally believe, based on what I've assessed of this position, that it would be somewhat unfair for someone at my level, again, who's not an elected official, to in any way filter or make judgments or assessments from my vantage point. So I do agree that it needs to be done, and I've had conversations with members of the transition team and people who are in phases of evaluation that I think would help. But I'm looking at it more in a scientific manner, so that it's not subject to someone within the process saying, "Oh, well, this doesn't look right to me." I think it should be. I think at various levels. Outside of your level, it should be looked at by the rule and by the code that it's bound by. But I do think an evaluation is extremely necessary. So I agree with you, and I have worked on review tools and submitted review tools and used review tools that take some of the subjectivity out of it. At my phase, which means that I don't recommend any individual. I don't not recommend any individual. What I merely do is I'm sure that there are questions that are asked to every person who applies, and those questions will then be elevated, so that when you look at it, or another person you all, as this body looks at those, you're able to pull that information from those fields without it being tampered with by anyone, without myself saying, well, I think X, Y, and Z. So I agree with you on that.
Well, just at a risk of monopolizing this line of thought a little bit more, you also mentioned people not being trained.
Right.
And I think that's a huge deficit. I saw it on the port wardens and actually on several of the boards where the Board of Appeals, where two of the new members clearly had no understanding of what their role was. They took the attitude that if anything can go to the circuit court, it should go to the circuit court, and they should stand aside. When it's exactly the opposite. This was our last chance to avoid going to court. And I don't know who is supposed to be giving them that training. I believe it is supposed to be the Office of Law.
Right.
But I would hope that we can rely on you in this job to say, hey, we got people out there that we're not training, we're not supporting with resources. They're being asked to understand engineering issues that are beyond their qualification. And so we need to have a budget for them so that if Bay Engineering comes in with something, they can go to another engineering firm and say, can you check on this with us?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is one of those, maybe clerical put us in a direction that made you think it was sterile.
It's clerical,
but
I think it's hugely important.
Right. But what I meant in terms of processes is helping to establish, as a coordinator, the training protocol to say that every member upon going in must be trained, which is written in there to begin with. It wasn't followed before. And, that's the past. We can't necessarily blame. I'm trying to move forward, but they do. My recommendation is that all boards and commissions, being mindful of their time, right, and the fact that they're voluntary, needs to, like all of them collectively, need to go through another orientation and training just to put them, it's an aspect of capacity building to get them back on track. But that's something that's definitely going to
Well,
happen.
so just to coordinate with the chair, just like we've done with some of the other committees like Environmental Matters, I'm hoping that we will have staff people come to us on a regular basis
Mhm.
to give us a status report, how well the boards and commissions are working, which ones we need to get alderpersons to go out and do more recruitment to fill vacancies or whatever.
Absolutely.
And so we would get a regular report from you, just like we do from the planning director and from the director of environment and the
See,
environmental person and so on.
The
So-
challenge with that is, and this is thinking like larger than specifically boards and commissions. The challenge with that is they all give individual reports anyway, and
Who does?
Well, they're supposed to, the boards and commissions.
An annual report,
Right.
not
They-
an ongoing report.
Right, they give an annual report.
Right.
So the challenge with that is it could be more, it could potentially be more work for people who serve in a voluntary capacity.
No, I think that's work for you.
Okay.
I see it as you're telling us, I'm hoping you're gonna be telling us, we got a problem going on. We've
Right.
got a problem on such and such a board because people aren't showing up,
Right.
or they don't seem to have training, or their advisors make decisions for them, which I see a lot of happening, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So,
Right.
I think we're kind of thinking of a new day.
Yeah, we can
where
work
we-
on that.
Yeah.
So
Let me
yeah.
interject here, because I
Right.
think your question was directed at me as to what we would like to see.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of my notations has been forwarding of the minutes from the committee meetings. We don't see them until the end of the year. So we have no idea when things are not functioning well. But at some point in the minutes, it should reflect if you don't have enough members there to have a quorum to conduct business.
Okay.
Okay, or if there appears to be some sort of conflict, a conflict of interest, for example. We don't know that, but you would have that information
Right.
because you would have access to their monthly meeting
Right.
minutes.
And they're all posted. So all of their meetings are the agenda and minutes are posted. But I think what you are
Well,
Are
let me ask
also
you where
looking-
they're posted. We know they're attached to their meeting agendas.
Well, they're findings. They do findings, a lot of them, rather
Yeah.
than
Well, some of them,
minutes.
right.
okay, well, you're talking about the planning commission and those do findings.
Right.
But are all of the minutes
Yeah.
attached and
Yes.
published somewhere?
Yes.
And where can they be found?
I will forward you the link and other information on that to your email address and give them. But they are all posted, and they're actually bound. They're supposed to do it within a certain time period. Both processes, so the agenda and the minutes. So but some of them, to both of you all's points, some of them don't always adhere to that.
And that's part
Right.
of what we need to be
Yeah.
addressed.
Yeah. So
But
yeah.
I'll hold on, because I have a list of things that I've heard you say you're going to be doing. But Alderman, do you have a question?
Yeah, and they are, it's kind of hit, yeah, like
It's
Mr.
a little
Reynolds
hidden.
said, it's hit or miss in terms of
Yeah.
if the boards post them or not, but it's not a part of the city council. We have our city council calendar where we can view all the agendas. It's a separate webpage.
Right.
But yeah, the previous administration didn't always populate all of those websites.
Well, and that's the problem we're trying to address,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's a new
Um,
day.
Go ahead, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a few other things, or?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I do want to second Ross's comments about the board members needing training. And I think some of them even, I believe the planning commission there may even be a state requirement that those commission members have opportunities.
Yeah.
And a part of the problem is, their budgets were cut many administrations ago, if I'm not mistaken, which could be used for some of the boards for training purposes. But my one recommendation would be to reach out to, I'm not sure if all the boards have city liaisons, but some of them have city staff liaisons. Many of them do.
Right.
And so those folks, I think it may be worthwhile reaching out to them, making sure they're aware of how to operate with the board, what kind of standards the board should be held standard to, because they are the staff who go to all the meetings. I'm sure it'd be difficult for you to do that, but they do. And I know that's where we have encountered in the past some of the liaison or department representatives even giving kind of incorrect information, to be quite frank with it. And that might be one area where you could help head that off.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's all
I think cleaning up the process is a lot of what's going to take up your time initially.
Yeah, it has.
Because we have departments that are responsible for committees, like Housing and Human Development, for example, that is supposed to be manned by the planning department, and they have not had minutes for forever.
Yeah.
And so while they're not jeopardizing funds at this moment, that may not always be the case.
Right.
And so I think part of what we're saying is that we're going to have to rely on you to make sure they know what their responsibilities are. Almost all of the committees are attached to some chapter in the code.
Mm-hmm.
So we know where they belong.
Right.
They may not know where they belong, but you can track where they belong.
Right.
As far as training is concerned, the law department is supposed to do the legal training, and maybe that's done collectively or on an as-needed basis, but that should be part of the annual planning process, I would gather.
Yeah, I would gather the exact same, but the reality is they and I don't want to misquote, but it's been some time since they've had a training process at all, and so that was kind of job number one is going to the law office and finding out exactly what they do when they take them through that process. And a part of that is the ethics aspect of it as well, that they sign off and speak to conflicts of interest and things of that nature, which, and I don't mean to alarm you, but there are a number of people who have been sitting for a while who have not gone through that process. They haven't signed their name to anything stating their membership on a particular board of commission. So I only say that to say, as we go through the conversation and we speak about minutes and things of that nature, I think those are like the most obvious aspects of evaluation that need to be done, but there's a deeper dive, and a part of that, lends itself to actually saying we should begin the training process as well as revisiting what their purpose is and why members sit and all of those things. So that's all a consideration.
I guess, and I guess the training really depends upon the function of the committee or board.
Absolutely.
Everybody doesn't need the law department to train them.
Right.
But everyone will need to know what their mission is and what their roles and responsibilities are as members of a given committee.
Absolutely.
As well as their terms. I believe most of the committees say until replaced.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? If they are never replaced, are they there, into perpetuity? Do we have strict term limits?
Yes, we do.
But these are things that they need to know also.
Right.
And we do, as we get your updated list of where the vacancies are.
Right.
I mentioned to you earlier, everyone hasn't seen your list. I've had the benefit of seeing it. But most of us don't have a clue where the vacancies are. And we know there are many. So we should all be put on notice to begin to look for people to populate those boards and commissions.
Right.
Yeah, so we all need to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we interrupted you. Is there,
No, sometimes I really need to be interrupted, so
Well,
I don't
we know
mind.
that,
So,
so-
but,
but
I mean,
did
what
you
I will
highlight
say,
on-
well, what I will say is that, I want you all to be assured that, the vitality and kind of health of boards and commissions, in reflection of you all's duties and what you all do, is like a priority. So it's prioritized, because I agree with one of the first statements that you made, which is this isn't actually an arm, right, that allows you all to do deeper work. And if that work is not holistic, and it isn't complete and isn't done the right way, it doesn't allow you all to be as effective as you can be. And, you know, I take that serious because, as you all recall, I was on the other side, and I was one of the number one complainers. But coming on this side and understanding that basically the appointment process is probably the most clear process out of all of this, because it's actually much deeper stuff with existing membership. I'm really relying on the work also of the transition team as they look at boards and commissions, which I think is going to be pretty informative, because it'll allow us to look at what is viewed as some of those areas that you talk about as needing attention and needing work. So I'm looking forward to my relationship and working with them, and also moving into the process of beginning to actually fill these seats. So we're on a couple different tracks, you all. And one of those tracks is we could stop the train and completely revamp the entire process, or we could do them like build the plane as we're flying it. I do believe that there are some boards and commissions that need to be immediately focused on, both seating people on those boards and commissions, like HACA as one, so that they can have a strong quorum to make some.
HACA's not one of our boards or commissions,
Right.
however.
Well, as a HACA board, the mayor does seat people on that board.
The mayor recommends, the
Right.
council confirms.
Right.
Yes.
So the mayor's recommendations need to come down. The belief is that they need to come down sooner than later, and then moving to others.
Well, I
thank
would
you.
like to ask you to come back to us, and as the Rules Committee, I think we're all interested in the process and how we're moving forward. If you would share with all members of the council the list of boards and commissions and the vacancies, and particularly as it relates to ward-specific vacancies and terms, so we can start looking down the road to begin to think about people whose terms may expire, let's say, June 30th or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And any other procedures that you would like to put in place so that we can move forward. You're absolutely correct. There are commissions and boards that need some direct attention, and there are others that have been functioning rather well.
Right.
So we just
Right.
need to get a clear picture.
But see, I would ask for something even deeper than that. I think that you are marching very deeply into policy areas. And so when you say, we really need to start over or things like that, I think we need to be part of that process.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a strong mix of boards and commissions that have promulgated rules and procedures, and there's a whole bunch of important ones, like the Port Warden, that don't have rules and procedures. I think they all need to have rules and procedures, and I think those rules and procedures need to come to this committee for approval for land use for titles 20, 21, and 22, and we have a couple of others, and for boards that are like Title 15, is that under environmental matters? I think it is. Part of the problem, I think, is that they don't have, for themselves even, rules and procedures, and they certainly don't have them promulgated. The Board of Appeals does have a promulgated set of rules and procedures, and I think that's where the trouble starts.
Right.
When there's no rules, and when people come before those bodies and they don't know what to expect, that's not right.
Right.
And that's been laying fallow, well, for some, like Port Wardens, has never had them. And
Yeah,
that's an important deficit, and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
So, I think we need to know the vacancies, but we also need to get in a deeper dive.
I do think that I agree with you, and I think that you know, there needs to be more it needs to be more symbiotic, because there's an aspect of it being siloed. And I agree with you on that, because in order to make it work better, I think it should be, you know, you all identify from where you are ways that it needs to be improved, and then I can also gather other information and then put that into somewhat of a report.
Right.
Because I do think involved in that conversation is the Office of Law, which takes it, I didn't go to law school, so it takes it in an entirely different direction, but I do think, you know, some of those entities coming together and working on it would, you know, yield a better process.
When I was outlining the concept that I was asking him to consider, I did mention rights and responsibilities, and in my mind, that includes procedures and processes.
Right.
Not just giving us a list, but absolutely making them aware of what their responsibilities are as members of these boards and commissions.
Right. So they have, so what has been outlined, I will tell you, what has been outlined, and it's a bit skeletal, but what's been outlined is requirements for the board, you know, for said board or commission, and duties, and that's the extent of it. So the duties are much more esoteric in the sense that they're advisory and in terms of facilitation, but they don't dig deeper down as to say, you know, what I think I'm hearing you say is that they need to be bound by a series of, like, what dictates their decision or vantage point on a particular decision point that they have to make. And also, some of the boards and commissions, to your earlier point also, like Port Wardens, it's much more. It's grounded much more in a quasi-judicial, you know.
Right, so some boards have both
Right.
Advisory and quasi-judicial.
Right.
Planning Commission advises us on Title 21 and that, but they also make decisions on approving projects.
Right.
I think I would really encourage you, or I would ask you for us, I'd like to see the rules and procedures for every one of the boards and commissions. I
Right.
bet you're not going to be giving us a big stack. And I think that is a place for them to start to get educated.
Right.
You know, when the new people on the Board of Appeals go read their rules and procedures, I hope they're going to see
Right.
their job isn't to sidestep
Yeah.
and let things go to circuit court. Other bodies have, I mean, like HPC have very rigorous rules and procedures. I think that those are also policy documents, and I think they should be reviewed by the council, and I think they should be approved by the council. That will be a debate with the Office of Law, because the land use prerogatives have been given away by the council. As I said earlier, I think we gave away too much. One of my appeals before the Board of Appeals was, what kind of standing do alderpersons have as officers of the city? And I think we have a lot more standing than we're given in these boards and commissions. But we also have to make sure we have rules where we don't overstep our authorities and prerogatives. So anyway, I agree with you, Chairwoman, that we need to have another visit.
No, I agree also.
Yeah.
And I would actually say to you all that it's good to hear that, because I do think that what we are seeing is that, you know, whenever there's grumblings about authority or an imbalance of power, to me that also illustrates that maybe there's there's not enough definition of roles and responsibilities and purview. So I agree with you. I think we should get working on that.
And I,
Alderman,
oh.
I was just going to
Okay,
recognize
thank you. So, yeah, I definitely do agree with you, Alderman Arnett, on, especially on the quasi-judicial boards. I think the other boards might be a little more, it might be a lot to ask of some of them, because I know the Human Relations Commission, they primarily act as kind of like a facilitator, mediator, and others like the Conservancy Board, they really don't have too many formal, and they don't have
No,
anything
but look at the
they don't have any
Annapolis-
binding decisions.
Look at the
but-
Annapolis Environmental Commission, and I think that they way overstepped their prerogatives in directly negotiating with Crystal Spring, or on Crystal Spring, and getting into negotiations and developments about stormwater management and things like that. I've said that to them. I think they should deal with all those issues, but the dialogue should be with us and flowing this way. But I would quickly recognize that that is subject to debate. I mean, we don't have those
Yeah.
boundaries firmly established.
Yeah.
But there was a
I don't know.
while when AEC was off the ranch. They were definitely negotiating with the power of the city, which they did not have, with developers and making deals. I don't think that's correct. They are an advisory group, and they should be advising us about those things. So anyway, we're getting
Well,
way into
Mr.
the
Rao,
weeds.
No.
you know that you have your work cut out for you, right?
Yeah, I've known since the moment I opened the file, believe me. But, you know, I do think that the conversation that you all just had, the exchange, it can be painful, but it's necessary. I think on the other side of working out all of these gray areas is clarity, and clarity will allow the work to be done in a much more streamlined way, because if you have any of those questions, any of them, then that's room for you to get the answers to them. And as coordinator, I think that's an aspect of my job. I do think it does require, if you all become more involved in that process, then I do think it will encourage other departments to then elevate the amount of information and inquiry they take into whichever boards and commissions they essentially are aside, you know?
With your help, we plan to encourage
Right.
them.
All right, okay.
So,
We're abusing another board and commission here.
really, and so I'm afraid we do have to move on.
Well,
but,
thank you.
Can we invite you back next month?
Absolutely.
To give us an update on where we are, and in the interim, you're going to share with the full council, the committees and commissions that have vacancies?
Absolutely. And I'll also, if you can, in our email exchange following this, so we don't take up any more time, if you have a series of action items
Yeah.
or things so that when I arrive at the next meeting we have, I can, deliver some things that, just so you have an opportunity to see kind of more clearly what's ahead of us.
Well, I think you've heard one of the things we want to really be able to see is where in the code speaks to the mission
Right.
of that board or commission.
Right.
And
And
then
that
there are
will give
rules
us
and
their-
procedures underneath that.
Right,
Yeah.
the parameters of that body,
Absolutely.
so.
Thank you all.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, next item, legislation before the committee, 0118, public ethics and financial disclosure. And it appears that we have members of our Ethics Commission. Would you gentlemen please come forward? For the record, could you identify yourself and tell us what your role is on the committee?
I am Jim Dolezal, and I'm chairman of the Ethics Commission, and have been for about 5 years. And Kevin?
I'm Kevin Chase. I am vice chairman of the Ethics Commission. I've been on the commission for 2.5 years, 2 years as the vice chair.
Wonderful.
And we have 2 vacancies. Put that on your list.
Out of 4 people or 5?
5.
Out of 5.
And
Okay.
Dave Blyden is our 3rd member, and he's out of town this week.
Mhm.
And he is a lawyer,
He's a lawyer,
a tax lawyer.
tax lawyer. He's busy then, right?
It's a busy time. Well, actually, David is a judge in the district tax court.
Oh, okay.
So he's not busy doing taxes, he's
Right.
helping negotiate and decide.
All right, sorry to keep you so long, but
Yeah.
I think you witnessed a very important conversation
Yes,
and a new day, I think, for the council really to reassert its prerogatives in very essential areas.
So this legislation speaks to updating our ethics code. So where would you like to begin?
I think there aren't that many changes being proposed. Some of them are required by state law, and that's the real urgency as far as getting this passed. I think the best way is to walk through page by page as far as where
Sure.
the changes are, if that's agreeable to you.
That would be great.
We can answer questions or present what the issue was and why it's being changed.
That would be terrific.
Good? Are we all looking at the ordinance 1-18?
Yes.
The first change is on page 3, line 41.
I see a change on page 2.
Yeah, an important one.
Line 35,
I
and
agree.
again, line 40. They may be editorial changes.
Those are
That's right.
editorial, yes.
Okay. Adding the word "the" and deleting any?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, page 3.
The reason that we've changed or suggesting the change to qualified relative, meaning spouse, siblings, parents, children, and their spouses, and immediate family being spouse, dependent children, and anyone living in that household, was that we've had complaints in filing financial disclosure forms that require you to provide financial information on your adult children and so forth. And this clarifies the issue of the immediate family is literally everyone in the immediate household. So that resolves the issue of financial disclosure and how far it should be expanded to. Because the way it read was that you had to provide financial reporting on your parents. And that was totally illogical, and we never meant it to be that way.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Another note for about line 43, 44, the adding in the people living in the official's residence takes into account more modern families that are in our society now, where not everybody is a blood relative or by marriage.
And we did have a problem several years ago where a contract was awarded to a live-in person, and that caused us a problem and caused them a problem as far as the ethics law. If we continue on to page 5, I believe that's the next change. Line 5. The requirement, or our desire to codify the requirement for the Ethics Commission to meet with Human Resources is just a good practice from the standpoint HR provides the training and indoctrination to new employees and so forth. On line 12, This change is made to really codify the way the process is really working. The city attorney has been filing our annual reports to the State Ethics Commission. But the code said the Ethics Commission was responsible for filing the reports. So this way it can go either way.
Mhm.
I don't believe there's anything else on page 5. Page 6. Line 25 is a requirement from the State Ethics Commission and state law that was passed this last summer. And we do have lobbyists registered in the city. So therefore, we have to have the correct language in relative to lobbyists. Next page, 7, line 27. It's actually line 30, and I have an amendment that is being proposed. I believe that's in your paperwork.
Mhm. The budget amendment?
No,
Other page.
It's the
Oh,
page
okay.
with 3 amendments.
There's one for page 6. Right? Amendment number 1 is page 6, line,
Yes, that is correct. I'll explain this now. When we drafted the legislation, I provided a copy to the State Ethics Commission, who has to provide final approval for whatever is passed by City Council, and asked them for a staff review, so that if there were any issues that were incorrectly being proposed in our ethics code, that we could catch them before it went to City Council. Their general counsel called me this morning, and these were the only 3 areas that they had concerns with, and requested that they be changed. The first one is the inclusion of the lobbyist paragraph, which is currently on line 30, page 7, and they've requested that it be moved to page 6, line 29, as a new paragraph there, paragraph 4.
okay?
So it's kind of pick up and move over.
You're creating a new 4, is that on
Right.
page
It's a
6?
new 4, and the old 4 turns into 5.
Right.
And then 3 drops out of section C on page 7.
Okay,
Sorry. And then paragraph 3 under section C, line 30 on page 7 drops out. So it's just a copy and paste, so to speak.
Okay.
And if I may, Amendment 2 is basically a textual change, which they wanted us to make relative to former employees or former officials.
I'm sorry, repeat that one? Are you
On
on
page-
page 7?
Page 7.
40
Page
line
7,
40.
line 27. Amendment 2 makes a change to that line, and so a period of 1 year after an elected official leaves office, the former official may assist or may not assist or represent another party. Elected officials in the city are only city council and the mayor, by definition in this code.
But I think the state commission wants to be more in line with the rest of the municipalities and governments in Maryland. I think that's what the state code says. So just kind of bringing us in line in case you guys want to open up a whole nother part of the government and have more elections.
Yeah.
Now, Joe Budge apparently has made a proposal that this be changed to include compensated work on, to cover compensated assistance.
Joe,
And-
did you want to come up and talk to us about that? I'm trying to figure out
Is
where
Joe
you're,
here? Yes.
Still here? Didn't you hear him smacking in the back of the head?
Thank you, George.
Well, this is one of their, one of theirs also. Are you adopting Alderman Budge's amendment? Have you,
I would like to hear it discussed, and then we'll do whatever you like.
sure,
okay,
all right.
so do you like to insert it here
Well,
where we're?
let's hear from Joe what it is.
Well, I just want to, procedurally, where we are. So we're still on page 7, because I thought you were
Right.
moving on.
Yes, we're on page 7, lines 21 through 29, which is post-employment limitations and restrictions.
Right,
Okay, so Alderman Budge's amendments would substitute.
They would be an insertion. For the record, my name is Joe Budge, 9 Randall Court, and I am a former elected official. In reviewing this text, which I've recently had need to pay attention to, it occurs to me that the restrictions outlined here are far in excess of the state standards and are in sort of venture into the political arena rather than the pure ethics arena. The state standards, the state code regulates both of the activities discussed in paragraphs 1 and 2 here, but the restrictions they impose are strictly on for hire or for compensation activities by the former officials. So a former official cannot represent any party for compensation on any specific matter that the official was involved in during his tenure in office. And a former elected official may not assist another party for compensation for a matter that involves legislation for a period of 1 year after leaving office at the state level. Here at the local level, we cannot assist anyone, period, with some exception for the city, in terms of matters that we had anything to do with for the rest of our lives. And for legislation, we can't assist anyone, even the city, for a full year after leaving office, whether or not we're compensated. Now, in practical terms, that means that I could not work on the city dock master plan, the comp plan, parking, the market house, the zoning matters that Alderman Arnett and I were involved in. I cannot work even as a volunteer or with my community association on any of these topics, which seem, and I gather some people might like that, but I think that's more political than ethical. And I certainly understand that the compensation side of the issue does cross the ethical boundaries. It's essentially using your office for profit, as opposed to civic engagement. And I recognize that distinction, and I'm not trying to erase that line at all. So my recommendation is in both paragraph 1 and 2 to insert the words "for compensation" in the appropriate places to apply to both of these restrictions.
So, contact in a
So-
specific manner. For compensation, and so it would be, number one, it would be the second line, right after matter, we would insert for compensation, and then involving.
What
the
line
city.
are you on?
Sure.
Well, on mine, it's line 27, I believe. So, number
For
one is a
number
former
two.
official, under C1, a former official or employee may not assist or represent any party other than the city in a case, contractual, or other matter for compensation, or is it other matter involving the city for oh yeah,
Involving the city,
for
yeah.
compensation. I can't figure out exactly where this is supposed to go, but the clause for compensation would fit in here. So, if you got
In a
on
specific
a Ward
manner
1
involving-
Residents Association committee that's looking at parking, that would be, as a volunteer, that would be perfectly acceptable. But if you were, it started up a small company and were advising them in exchange for some kind of payment.
Right, yeah.
So I would suggest after the word city, involving the city.
There's cities twice in that line. Is it the second?
Second one.
Second city.
Well,
Former official employee may not assist or represent any party other than the city in
So
a case,
Jim,
contract, or other specific matter involving the city for compensation, if that matter is one in which the former official, et cetera. Ralph?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would,
Oh,
I'm kind of out of the business of writing legislation, but I would recommend that the phrase be inserted after party in the first line.
represent any
and
party for compensation? Okay.
Yeah, same.
Does-
I would like to just echo what Mr. Budge has testified on. As a former city employee, this clause gave me some concern as well. I mean, for example, if I significantly worked on the Greenscape program as a city employee, this clause, I could potentially get in trouble with this if I sought to assist my community association with organizing a Greenscape program for the community. And that clearly I don't think is the intention of the ethics code.
Mhm.
So I definitely would like to see this restricted, and I think what Mr. Budge proposes is a good way. But I do want to hear your thoughts and assessment on this.
The city ethics code has to be in full compliance with the state ethics code and ethics commission recommendations. On this particular post-employment limitations and restrictions, they have a Model A code and a Model B code. A is for larger metropolitan areas in the state. Under the Model A, they do include for compensation in both paragraphs. So I don't see any I don't think the state would have any problem with us inserting for compensation. We as the Ethics Commission have to enforce the code as it's written, and that's why you got a determination that you didn't like.
Which I respect.
Yes.
I understand that.
So-
I believe the commission would have no objection or no problem in having that change made.
So where is that phrase added in the state model?
I can read it to you. It's under post-employment limitations and restrictions, and it reads, a former official or employee may not assist or represent any party other than the county, city, or town for compensation in a case, contract, or other specific matter involving the county, city, or town, if the matter is one in which the former official or employee significantly participated as an official or employee. That's the first paragraph that you were reading in our code, as stated in the Model A. The second paragraph is, a former elected official may not assist or represent another party for compensation in a matter that is subject to the subject of legislative action for 1 calendar year after the elected official leaves office.
So if we got that language and had Rules Committee amendments 1 and 2,
Right. Alderman Budge, are you comfortable with adopting the model?
Certainly, absolutely.
Okay, so, and if you're recommending that we use the model, Mr.
Yeah,
Chase?
we just don't know if the committee or the full council want to debate the, as Joe called it, lifetime ban for a former official or employee for compensation. This clause is very specific to a matter or a specific project, let's call it. So let's say that you look at, we've had this debate with a number of the aldermen before and some of the former employees, is that, let's say it was, the Market House lease. So
Do you
that's-
have to mention the
well,
market?
the other one that comes up is Crystal Springs.
right,
So you can have a specific project that an employee was involved with, like at Crystal Springs. Well, that project could go on for years. But then you could have another one where maybe it was a project involving a fence at a house that somebody ruled on as a public official or an employee. How does that go into the future? So obviously people they have much longer careers. They can leave public service either as an employee or an elected official and want to consult on, let's say, fences or that. So there's been talk about relaxing the lifetime ban. But you have to be very careful on determining that timeline, because obviously if it's a 1 year and it's like a Crystal Springs, that's been going on since, I got back involved in the city years, whereas somebody's fence could be very short. You mentioned the lifetime ban, is whether or not the council wants to discuss that. Is that lifetime ban, even for compensation, fair and appropriate?
Yeah,
But the
it's-
second one is, for compensation, it does, I believe it's, the model code and what we've always discussed is the council and the municipalities have the ability to make any ethics code stricter. And that's what the council and the Office of Law decided 5.5 years ago now?
Yes.
Yeah, so they wanted to make it stricter. It might have been a little too strict. So obviously you guys have the ability to, relax it to the code. But I think you guys should consider, number one, or if you want to put a time limit on it or not. If you're okay with a lifetime ban for all employees and elected officials on a specific project, then that's fine. But that lifetime isn't always lifetime, because hopefully issues like Crystal Springs and the Market House get resolved.
well, it's not just those, and it is in my ward, it has come into play with the Eastport Shopping Center.
Yeah,
And the part that I find uncomfortable about that is the former employee was also the former boss of the very employees who are ruling on the Eastport Shopping Center.
Right. But and to kind of put some color commentary about how we look at that, if the developer changed or the parties changed, it's no longer the same project. I don't know much about the Eastport Shopping Center other than what I read in the paper and what I hear at council meetings. But if you have a project that gets approved and then they come back and do some more, that might not be this. It might be significantly different. Might not be the same project. So there's where kind of the rub goes. But if you put a timeline on it, it eases up on everybody. But then you still run into your specific problem. It could be 5-6 years. 5-6 years in any job, even at the city, except for some of the elected officials, that's nothing. 5 years, your kids are out of one school and into the next one.
So what's the remedy?
Well, I'm comfortable with going to the Model A. which I think addresses Joe's issue. My issue is the influence that the former director has on the staff for a project that was live and submitted when the former director was the director. And I think that there are influence issues there. And I don't know whether you say until all the staff have turned over, the former director might not survive that long. But it really is a very difficult situation. In fact, 2 former directors are being paid to advise on the Eastport Shopping Center.
Well,
One
then I
once
would-
removed and one's twice removed.
I would, and I think that Jim probably agreed, just leave the code as it is, and leave it to us to, if there is a complaint, to determine if the project they were significantly involved, if it was still the same project.
Right.
So you're recommending to keep the lifetime ban?
Yeah. If
With
there's-
the financial, but inserting the compensation?
Right, because I
So
do
leaving it
think
up to
that,
the board
you know,
to-
it does limit people, even for us, if we leave and we wanted to, work on, consult or do something with the ethics or any other commission or any other employee. I mean, hopefully, well, obviously almost everybody on our boards and commissions lives in the city, and they're very active in the community, and they will stay active after they leave.
Madam Chair?
So, Alderman?
Yeah, another question then, is I'm just thinking, I also work for Anne Arundel County, and I know that we can submit, proactively submit questions, concerns to the Ethics Commission for rulings.
Mhm.
So would a former employee be able to submit such an inquiry to the city's commission for a ruling in a
That's
similar manner?
part of our mission
Yeah.
and responsibility, yes. Their formal advisory opinions, we publish them if there is no personal information or proprietary information. We publish our opinions on the website under the Ethics Commission.
The one recommendation I would have would be to send, I know the county periodically sends out, or they used to anyway, periodically send out a newsletter with recent rulings to all of the city or the county employees. That might be beneficial for you to do to the city employees as well, to let them know.
That's a very good idea.
Well, we have a
and-
solution to that.
And we can work with the Human Resources Department on that. She has developed a employee handbook that has an ethics training within it for every employee, particularly new employees.
Right. The city's IT department deserves some credit, but they have upgraded the system, and you can go online now and pick a board or commission, and then anything is posted on that particular part of the website, you get an email with a link to it. So you can sign up for city council, so anytime that you guys post an agenda or a meeting minutes, I get an email, and you can sign up for ethics, and every time we post some agenda or notes or minutes, you get email on it. You can do that for all parts of the city government now. It's very 21st century of us.
We should have said that when Mr. Rao was in the room.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt.
We had to bite our lip.
And they did a great job. It is a great system. We're really moving forward.
Good. So, Madam Chair,
So, go ahead.
because there's more changes, do we want to,
Well, let's address this. So
we would,
the commission will adopt the state model language
Okay.
for both 1 and 2.
right.
Yes,
So
and we'll
that would be-
provide that in the amendment format for you.
Yes.
So we'll have the
Okay.
Office of Law do that, the
Yes.
checklist.
So then
So
we'll
I
move
would,
on to-
I would move that we accept the Ethics Commission amendments 1, 2, and 3, these that we've gone over, and that the Rules Committee have Amendment 1 and 2, which is to accept the changes in this section, C, post-employment, that switch to the language in the State Ethics Code Model A.
Well, the Ethics Commission is going to endorse those recommendations
Right.
as part of theirs.
We'll work with the Office of Law for you.
Oh, okay,
yes.
so you'll give us another set of,
Yes,
So
okay.
we'll
that will be
Yeah.
drafted by the Office of Law per our guidance.
What is the urgency on getting this passed?
As far as the legislation package, the requirement was to take effect the 1st of October, but they didn't give us the specific guidance until the end of October.
And some of it today.
So,
Yep.
so it's a matter, it has to be done.
So we could accept your amendments 1, 2, 3, and then we could we could have Rules Committee amendments 1 and 2, which would be to change to the state language, which we'll have to get. And then that can get out of this committee and go before the council if there's urgency. Otherwise, we'll need to have another meeting to rule on those two amendments, right?
I think we can adopt these 3 amendments as well as the 2
Okay,
state,
we agree then. Yeah.
without us having to write an amendment, because they know what the language should be. They have it. They just have to get it blessed by the law department, I assume.
Yes. and put
So
proper
in
format.
essence, we will accept all 5 of their amendments. But are there others?
Well, there's more to
there's-
go over, but I
They're-
don't think there's.
but-
They're already in
any-
the bill though, so.
Madam Chair?
Minor, but, so I would consider the 2 from the state, the 2 models from the state to be 4 and 5 on their sheet of amendments,
Okay.
if we'll
Okay.
trust them to.
We can do that.
All right, I'll make that motion.
Madam Chair, I just want to get a clarification. So what you'll be working with the law office to do is to get the state model amendments following the state model that will essentially basically just insert the for compensation clause.
That's the only difference.
That's basically the only difference. Okay.
Yes.
That's just-
It'll be just a one little underline in there.
So you'll be keeping the lifetime prohibition and the
Yes.
year for, okay.
And to go back and answer your question, Alderman, you asked, can people ask for opinions? Yes, and we have done a number of those over the last year for different former employees.
And Alderman,
Right, but most of them, they've been in, since they are personal data, they're not published in whole, so we try to protect their names as well as their business interests.
Okay.
And we've been very quick when they ask a question, a couple of days to a week.
Oh,
So I know it's
great.
very important when you're running, we know it's very important running businesses that you don't want to wait around for 4 or 5 months to get somebody to say, oh yeah, you can take that job. No.
That's faster than the county, so
Yeah.
good job.
there are only a few more changes in the code. At the bottom of page 7, lines 44 through the end of the page, and then the top of the next page, you have required language by the State Ethics Commission.
Okay? So it's required. Check. Then we go to
That takes us to page 11.
page 11.
Page 11. Page 11, the section on public record. This is a significant change from what was in the code and an improvement on the process that the law office uses to provide access to financial disclosure forms. As you know, financial disclosure statements are public information. And what this change does is it provides, well, number one, it provides for the examination by the public and then the recording of whoever came in from the public as far as their name, their address, and also their employment, because you don't always know if a person is representing the newspaper or themselves personally, or whether they're representing a law office or whether they're on a personal basis. So recording that information and then providing notification to the person whose financial disclosure form was accessed. The law office has not allowed copying of financial disclosure statements, even though the state allows it. The reason that they don't do it is that it's a bother. We consider the information to be sensitive and private while it's publicly accessible. For having someone to carry out your financial disclosure form or Joe's is really, I won't call it an invasion of your privacy since it's public information, but it really needs control. So the last portion of this is that the person whose financial disclosure was released, that they be notified and advised that the information has been provided. So it makes very good sense as far as the way the law office handles inquiries. They're all handled by Karen Steele, the receptionist and law,
Liaison.
what is her position?
She's also our commission liaison.
Yeah, she's our liaison.
Oh, okay.
So, in the opinion of the Ethics Commission, this is a very important change, and it's good for all of our financial disclosure forms. Can we move on?
I have one comment on that.
Oh, excuse me. In my conversation this afternoon with the general counsel at the State Commission, they had, or she had, a possible concern that we were collecting too much information on the party who was coming in to look at the financial disclosure forms. She did not know if the State Commission, when they do their final approval, will have any exception to us collecting the home and the office. Her feeling was that it might be just in their eyes to be acceptable only to use the information that's on the person's identification, whether it's a corporate identification or a private driver's license. So her recommendation was that we leave the changes as they are. She expects the State Commission to accept them, but she's not too sure.
Okay.
And once the legislation is passed, we provide it to the state for final approval. They meet in 2 days as far as the State Commission. They'll be looking at this, so we may have feedback immediately if they have it on their agenda, and I believe they do.
What are the reasons for somebody being able to see these? Like you called me about mine because I put in too much information. I assume you threw that away. But why would somebody be able to come in and look at this at all anyway?
Well, how about your ex-wife and the one before that?
Oh, I know. And why indeed then? Why should they be able to use it?
Because it's public information.
Only
And
because I'm an elected official.
By the legislature of the state.
But don't you think that's a misuse of it? If it has nothing to do with, other than the fact that I'm required to file it as an official, it has nothing to do with them coming in and using this as a backdoor way to get information, maybe to increase alimony payments or something.
It's a
like
good
that.
point, because when you submit a PIA request, I can't recall, do you have to put a reason down for the request?
I didn't quite hear you.
When you submit a public information act request on the application, I can't recall if there's a field where you actually have to list why you are requesting access to this information.
In the ethics legislation, there is nothing, there's no reference to the state public information laws. It's a matter of, you don't have to have a reason, it's allowable. The fact is that the optional language that the state has put on us is that we can publish financial disclosure forms on the web if we wish to. We decided that our recommendation was that that not be done for the city. But it is public information and it's available.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, last time I was a city employee, there were a number of people who had concerns about this information being so readily available. So I think it's good that you've opted not to put it online. And along those lines, I know we did receive an email, or at least I did, from McShane Glover, who is, I think, requesting that this information be able to be copied and put online. But it might be worthwhile for you to, on the record, have a response. But I also have to say, I, for the record, disagree with her assertion for the reason I just went through, that city employees I know had concern about this, and at least this says people still have access, but it means they can't copy it and post it online, which obviously would be a problem for many people.
We think that our city and our commission, we would like to err on the side of caution. There's so much risk to all of us, because we also do financial disclosure forms as commissioners. There's so much risk to all of us as it is. You're just could be compounding that risk. If there is a concern, somebody can come in and read it, and then they can take notes, and then they can file an ethics complaint. That's what the process should be. Should not be, in our opinion, wide open, Wild West.
Right.
We already have Experian and OPM losing our information. We don't need another source for us to be.
So we don't need Ross's
Exposed.
ex-wives on Eastport Forum, right?
You might like them. They're wonderful people.
So, but it is up to it's up to the council to make the final determination. If you guys make the law, that's what we elected you for.
Well, if the state has said, leave it as it is, I say leave it as it is.
Yeah.
And if they
That's,
change their minds, they'll let us know.
Yep.
yes, that's how we should stand. Thank you.
Okay.
If we can move on, I believe the next change is on page 14, lines 9 through 11.
Right.
And that change was a matter of,
You go back to the new definitions.
it was,
These are your change in the code.
well, this is an editorial change to provide compatibility between financial disclosure of elected officials with financial disclosure of employees.
Okay. Right.
And going on to the next section, page 15. This is removing from financial disclosure the Alcohol Beverage and Control Board, because state law requires that they now file with the state. So we will have no review of their financial information. Alcohol, beverage, and control will be controlled by the state, and we don't mind it. Any questions on that?
Nope.
And that also includes lines 20 to 23, which is the Maryland law reference.
Editorial comments here.
And going on, page 17. That was language required by the state relative to the spouse of a regulated lobbyist. And since we have a lobbyist registration here, oh, I missed one. Page 16,
right?
Again, that's the language for the regulated lobbyist at lines 33 through 35. Thank you, Kevin.
But how's that numbering, that nomenclature gonna work? A is not gonna have anything, but there'll be a 1 and a 2 below it? So like, look at B below, you have for each position
What
reported.
page are you on?
I'm on page 16, starting at line 28. On 29, you have A, small a, and then you have 1 and 2, but it looks to me like there's nothing. So if you go down below for small b, it says, for each person reporting under this paragraph, the schedule shall include, and then 1, 2, and 3. Here you're going to have A1. There's nothing after A before you get to the subnumbering 1 and 2.
So,
I think it's going to have to be A, B, and C. And
I
then
believe this was because it was one total paragraph, and now it's divided in 2 subparagraphs.
so we just need to get Jacqueline to put a statement, opening sentence, so to speak.
Yeah, so under A, after A, would it be,
So-
for each position reported under this paragraph, the schedule shall include, then 1, a statement, 2, a statement?
Yep.
So that's just an editorial fix.
Right.
now, what would A be then?
A would start out just like B does, before it goes to the subnumbering. of
For
1.
each position reported under this paragraph?
Mhm. I mean, I don't know, that's supposition on my part, but,
Right, well, that sounds like a good starting point. I think don't worry, I'll go through a few editorial comments before.
okay. All right.
So this was a question for Jacqueline.
Yep.
Actually, though, if you look on the next page, 7,
7, it's the same issue.
yeah, same issue.
Mhm.
Basically, the way the codes are written, you have to have a preamble to every section,
Yes.
so,
So 16 and 17, no preamble.
yep.
And going on to the last page. The financial disclosure for the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis. This was for any new appointees that they file within 15 days of their appointment, so it's compatible with any new appointments within the city. It's a matter of consistency as far as new appointees, including the HACA. And statement of compliance, line 23, we've had complaints relative to the swearing and affirming under penalty of perjury. People have basically said we're being a little bit heavy-handed. So we've suggested the change being a signed statement affirming that they are aware of the, and understand the provisions of the ethics code.
Can
Check.
I ask a question going back to first one on page 18? Do we, in essence, get disclosure statements from the HACA?
Yes, we do, and they are the same format as your forms,
Okay.
Just a different header.
yes. That is, they have to report their financial interest and value of that financial interest. The difference between your forms and employees is that the employees only have to indicate their ownership of the financial interest, not the amount of ownership.
Okay. We just talked to Mr. Rowell about that, so I just wanted to be
Yes.
clear about that again. Okay.
Great. And remember as you saw back on the same section with the alcohol board, those are the list of all the other committees and commissions, boards and commissions that have to file the same financial disclosure form as an employee, if
Okay.
you're curious.
The quasi-judicial
Once.
boards and commissions.
Okay. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the Ethics Commission's 5 amendments.
I move to recommend approval of 0118 with the amendments from the Ethics Commission, the 5 amendments from the Ethics Commission.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Alderman Budge?
Yes, I had another suggestion that was fairly which was more technical than anything else. The timeline for reporting, for filing a financial disclosure for elected officials leaving office is 60 days following leaving office, which I think is fine. The timeline for former employees and appointed officials, however, is January 31st of the following year, which is great if the official leaves in December, but if the official leaves in January, they have a full 12 months to before they get around to filing their disclosure. And in addition to that, they have to file a disclosure for that entire calendar year. I think it's in the public interest to have the disclosure take place in a timely fashion, and I would recommend the 60-day thing, just like elected officials. And I think it's a unwarranted invasion of privacy to require disclosure of financial affairs after you leave office.
Where in
And
the code
if you
is
give me
that?
a minute, I can come up with the reference.
I'm looking at deadlines for filing statements on page 10.
Oh, we were just going to investigate that.
I'm sorry, my references are not in the ordinance, but it's paragraph 2.28.051.c.
Say that again?
2.28.0508.
It's gotta be 2.08.
Oh, wait, yeah,
Sorry. Yeah, 051C.
05. Yeah, so deadlines for filing statements.
Right, yes, sir.
So here it is under 3, individuals leaving office file 60 days after leaving office, but an incumbent official in 1 files a financial disclosure annually no later than January 31 of each year for the preceding calendar year. So that's, so we would say an incumbent official shall file a financial disclosure within 60 days of leaving the job, or? So, an incumbent official shall file a financial disclosure statement within 60 days after leaving.
Are you inserting new?
I would just use the language from the elected officials leaving office.
Right, that's what I'm trying to do.
Just
So in
copy-
1,
copy and
instead of
paste.
having January 31st, it would be, an official shall file a financial disclosure statement within 60 days of leaving their position. And 2, an official is appointed to fill a vacancy in office for which a financial statement is required, and who has not already filed a financial disclosure shall file a statement within 60 days of leaving that position. So 1, 2, and 3 will all have within 60 days of vacating whatever office they're in.
But 2 is filling.
I don't know.
You're still on section C?
Page 10.
Section
Yeah.
C2 is actually related to filling a vacancy. Am I
Well,
mis-
oh, okay, right.
You want to probably leave
Yes.
that
30 days.
within 30 days.
Okay, so it's 2, that would stay the same. So it's just going up to 1. An incumbent official shall file a financial disclosure statement within 60 days. Oh, no, so that person isn't leaving, they're just saying,
This
every-
one isn't, but you're adding the person that's leaving, right? So you're keeping this one as is.
well, 1.
Right, so you have 1 is annually. 2 is if you're appointed within, sometime within the year to fill a vacancy. So when I came on the commission in April, I had to file before May 24th or whatever. And then 3 is related to people that are leaving.
Right,
So I don't think there's a concern about 1 and 2, correct?
Correct.
Right.
So it's just related to 3 for officials when they leave.
So we want to take out the need to file once they have left.
No, I think what your concern is, so if an official leaves, you have 60 days after leaving office. And it should cover the calendar year immediately preceding the time you left office.
so I think it's okay the way it is then, right?
Right. And so, and that's for, it'd be employees and officials, commissioners. And for D, which is related to candidates, you must file within the year of your first elected. Candidate shall file. Candidate must be elected official. Fails to file. So there is no, basically, is there no statement about leaving here?
Joe, you were saying that you didn't think that they should have to file at all after they have left office?
No. I think they should file within 60 days.
Okay, so within 60 days, period.
Yes.
But that's what it already says. I think you're,
Yeah, I
for
don't,
officials.
Can I come read over your shoulder?
Yeah,
I
I'm
think-
sorry.
I think
Your
1
phone's a
and
little-
2 are fine.
So,
And 3 is fine.
yeah, so I think what you're
Yeah,
concerned
what is
about,
it?
It's fine.
so you have 2 separate sections. You've got, this is for officials, so this would be like an employee and an appointed official.
This is, no.
Okay,
we
so
have
this
an
is the first
amendment
section
on
they were
the
looking at. I
floor
think you're
anyway.
concerned
This
about
is
the
the
second
third
section,
one, unless they
candidates
adopt
for
it.
elected office.
I think
I
you're
mean,
looking
the
at the wrong
sixth one.
section.
Yeah, right, so you're backing up to,
Going to the working
This is
together?
elected officials.
so, okay, oh, you're,
No,
I'm
you're,
talking
going
about
to my
appointed
next
officials,
meeting when I leave here at 6:30. Are you going?
Well,
which
I was going
are,
to, but
What time does it start?
6:30.
Oh,
051.
I thought it wasn't 051. 050, I'm sorry. Okay,
caucus meeting.
yeah, you did, skipped a little quick there. 051, I'm
That's what
sorry,
I was
okay.
saying, we have an
Oh,
amendment
so
on
you're,
the floor.
so you're
which is
okay with the
five
effect, the,
amendments
I'm
from
okay
the
with 50.
ethics.
right, okay, so. Contents,
Well, we can amend the amendment if we have to.
Yes.
So all in favor of supporting the 5 amendments from the Ethics Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
So that was the motion that we...
We're just taking care of business while you guys are clarifying
The key
things
is
down there.
in C here.
okay.
Let me go back to the mic.
Oh, I see now, I get, I'm,
Well, we need to give a favorable
In the paragraph
recommendation
that
as
applies
amended.
to
Right.
appointed officials and employees, there is no discussion of leaving office. It just says employees and appointed officials shall file no later than January 31 of the following year.
Yep.
So if you leave office, you have until next January to file. I think that should be modified to 60 days, and it should not, your reporting period should end the day you leave office.
I'm looking at 3A. Does that not speak to that?
Sorry, I led you down to confusion. That was in section 51, that's specifically elected officials.
Oh,
If you
so
turn
we're
to
in a
page-
different section.
Yeah,
Okay.
page 15 of the bill.
Okay.
That'll get us closer. So page 15, line 28 is the section that Mr. Budge is referring to.
That doesn't have to do with former employees, that's just
Well-
the current.
That's the only thing it says about employees and elected and appointed officials.
Right, so there is no departure clause in this part of the code, is what he's getting at.
The section has no termination clause.
So,
Is that needed? Is that a state standard?
Well, I'm looking at line 33, and maybe the reference is, because it says they shall file a disclosure statement no later than 15 days after commencing employment or service pursuant to their appointment.
right,
So that's just,
so like if you hire or you appoint somebody new, they have 15 days to file financial disclosure.
so
Unless
that's
you,
initial.
what's initial, and they don't need to do it if, let's say that, you promoted, assistant chief to chief, we already have their financial disclosure, they don't have to do it again. That's what that's getting at, but there's no departure clause. And the departure's always been, if you were on the board or commission, it's been hit, if they file, they don't file.
Yep, when an official departs, there's no requirement for them to file financial disclosure for the period of the year, or period.
Right,
for
so,
that year.
if I leave the commission, let's say next week, I will not have to file for,
No, you don't need to file.
You don't need to file, period, right?
right,
Right.
period.
What's
Right.
what's the
So we don't
benefit?
need a section on that.
Right, that's if I think the model code doesn't say you have to do it.
Did you
Right.
file anything after you left working for the city?
No.
Yeah.
And Mr. Budge, what do you see as the benefit to
Okay,
having?
I read the existing code 180 degrees opposite from the way the commission members read it. And I am perfectly happy with the way they interpret it.
Yeah, me too,
Right.
especially
Okay.
since it's
Okay.
Yeah,
6
but we do
o'clock.
require elected officials and former candidates to file for the year that they were, so
Right.
all of your opponents still have to file.
And they should have to file into perpetuity.
Yes, that's right.
Just to
Keep
be
on
me. I'm
filing.
sorry, but the mic.
And this commission will be holding them accountable.
Thanks.
Okay, well,
Should be published in the Capital.
we're all being mean up here. Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion to give a favorable recommendation to 0118 as amended by the Ethics Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, further discussion, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you for staying.
All right, thank you very much.
Our pleasure to serve.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask Takia to run the notes by Mr. Dozel so that we can make sure we have them right for the minute, if that's okay with you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to, have we exhausted, I can't get out of this thing. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
Every time I say it's not going to take that.
I know, I told my wife the same thing.